Hey everyone, welcome to Ragdolls, not the cats. If you were here for the cats, I'm sorry. I have to come back another time. Are you having fun so far? Yeah, let's put an end to that. First off, Fiona always says I have to do this. Who am I? I'm Dwarf Boy Tom, whatever you want to call me. I've been using Linux for the past 3 years. That's what I have to say this because when you use Linux, you don't pay for it with money, you pay for it with your soul. Fiona says that's not enough to say, so I work at side effects like Alsgar mentioned. I suffer from daily pepcac, and then I work mainly on the character team, but also do a bunch of other stuff. Disclaimer, there's jokes hidden there with the arrows are pointing, and then there's some custom node shapes that I used here and there. If you want them, you can always ask Ferry. He makes all these cool ones, like Batman, if you're into that. Why is the title like not the cats? Well, when I Googled Ragdolls to come up with ideas for the title, Google was like, here's 1 million pictures of cats, you cat freak. So I was like, well, that's not what I was expecting because I live in this CG bubble where Ragdoll is something specific to me. So I thought I would clear that up. Well, now you're confused. You're like, what is a Ragdoll? What is it? Well, if you've seen these kind of crowds, you know, like we use Ragdoll to collide these zombies, for example, which basically we use our physics engine bullets to basically add physics to, and then they will collide and do that kind of stuff. But this talk is not about crowds specifically. It's more about the animate state. So you can see here, I've poorly animated Harry and Electra, and she's getting hit by a chair. And so you're like, whoa, how do I do that? Tutorial, please. I'm not. Luckily for you, earlier this year, Mihnia, who used to work at Side Effects, made this masterclass that's on our website. And so you get to interact with Lil Bot over here. He's got a nice little rig, and you can make him groove or whatever's happening in here. And then you can make him ragdoll because he's fully equipped to do that. And on top of that, we have this content library example, where Henry and Mihnia put that scene together. And then Dimitri, who tomorrow is going to tell you all to go cliff yourselves, made the environment and then rendered it out. So you can see the little bot trying to make it out of the factory. It's not looking too good. So before we go into APEX Animate State and the Ragdoll, let's back it up a bit and look at KineFX and what it is. And essentially with Houdini 18.5, we added like animation tools within the sub context. And here we have Capybara just walking around, and I have this rig pose, and I'm just moving its arm. So since Houdini 18.5, we've had this, and you could animate and rig characters. But since Houdini 20, we've added Apex-powered KineFX tools, which basically let you animate characters and rig them in a more efficient way. So here I have this really simple rig of Capybara. I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing something. And so in 21, we've added this guy called Otto who doesn't like shorts for some reason. And he's fully fledged with a full-blown rig, IKFK. You can pose him the way you want. And he's just ready to go. So you just plug him into Scene Animate, and then you can animate him also doing whatever that is. And then, boom, if you enter the animate state now, because Otto is ready to go, you can hit C, you'll get this little menu, and then you can go to the ragdoll here, and then, boom, just like that, Otto is a ragdoll, and he's being solved by our physics engine. So you're like, well, what do I need for this to actually work? Because there is some level of preparation so that you can actually make your character ragdoll, right? The physics engine does need a few things so that it can process your data adequately. That's the word. So you're like, oh, what do I need? There's 3 main components for Ragdoll to actually work. One of those is joint limits on your skeleton, because you want your character to kind of flop and ragdoll, but the right way. For example, your elbow just bends this way, right? Unless you built some other way than I am. So if your elbow goes that way, that's going to look wrong, and you probably don't want that. So what you want to do is set a bunch of limits so the solver knows how to treat those joints and how they should bend. Then the second step is you want to build your collision shapes. This is what the solver will see, and this is what will collide with the environment, other characters, props, and everything. And then specific to the animate state, we've got the mapping, which basically, because all of that simulation runs on the skeleton, what you need to do is then bake back that to the controls, so you can then animate on top of that if you want to do so. So limits on your skeleton, how does that work? Well, we have this node called configure joint limits, where you plug in your skeleton and then you can use the state to adjust the limits. But as you can see in this example, I've actually plugged a motion clip because we can infer limits from a motion clip. So what I recommend is you build some kind of calisthenics like this. This is what we use for Electra. And then based on that, you can infer some limits for your skeleton. What you can also do is, now that we have an animation catalog, you can bring that in, bring those poses in, and so that if you reuse that animation and you want to ragdoll within that animation, those limits will be fine because they will be inferred from that animation. And you can see here, like, white Electra has no limits, so she's completely stiff. And then you can see on the right, the wood Electra actually has some proper limits, so she's interacting in a way that's more pleasing and believable. New in 21, we've added these options to configure joint limits, so you can now plug in directly a packed character, and then you can initialize the limits directly from your controller limits. So if you set some limits on your controls, we can infer some skeleton limits based on those, and then you can either plug in a motion clip to add to those, or you can, again, pose it in the state as you see fit. The next step is making collision shapes. So that's what will interact in the solver with props, everything, and you get those nice collisions. If you're lucky, you can just plug in your skin and your skeleton inside these ragdoll collision shapes here, and you will get the, I thought I had a laser point, so this is just a clicker. The shape in the middle there is your collision shapes, and it works really well. When it doesn't, when it's not heuristically fine, then you have to build something more manual. Here's what we do for Otto. So we just like slice him up and then get some shapes out of that. So if your character requires some more manual intervention, you can dive into Otto since he's in HDA and kind of have a look at what we're doing there. And then if you just need to run the ragdoll solver up, then you're good to go. You just need a skeleton, you need those collision shapes, and then you can see Electra is ragdolling just fine on her own. For Apex, you will need the mapping, which I will talk about in a second. This is also new in 21. In the ragdoll solver now, you have these two new parameters with really long names, angular limit stiffness and angular limit damping ratio. And essentially what those controls is how much the solver will try to enforce those limits that you have set on your skeleton. So if you're experiencing jittering on your ragdoll because the elbow is trying to put itself into another position, you can try and reduce the stiffness and up the damping so it won't like try so hard to get back into a position that's inside the limits that you've defined. Mapping. So this is basically because once you've run the simulation on your skeleton, you probably want those transforms on your controls so you can animate on top on a new layer, do some tweaks if the solve isn't what you like. So for that, we have this node called map character in which you plug in your character, so your skeleton and your rig, etc. And then you just build those connections from the skeleton to the controls. So I've prepared this little GIF so you can see that, or GIF if you're into that. you can click the skeleton and map directly to a control. And then once you bake the result of your ragdoll, then the wrist transform will be baked onto your wrist control. And then the final touch is the state needs to know about all this, because you've done all that work. You need to tell the state, hey, this is where all that good stuff is. So on the Apex configure character, we have all these options here where you tell the state where your skeleton is, where your shapes are, that's a ragdoll collision, the name of your limits attribute, which is ragdoll join config, the name of your mapping, which is mapping in this case as well, and then your output skeleton path, which the ragdoll solver needs as well. And then boom, just like that. Oh, sorry. So because those are so many steps, and like many steps are hard to remember, we've built this recipe for ragdoll and the setup that you need to do. So you can see here, when I plop it down, some nodes will be pink because I like pink. And those basically require some manual intervention. And you have a little text there, like comments, that tell you what you should be doing with those pink nodes. And the rest you should be able to leave as default. And that's a great starting point to actually get your ragdoll set up for the states. You're like, well, I don't have an entire full-blown character. I just have a bunch of props, like a vase, a table. Well, it's super easy to do that now. For example, here you have a box carrying Otto to wherever he's supposed to go. And that's basically just, I took this box and made it a prop. And then we'll talk about what those constraints looking things are in a second. So essentially all you need is this CNAP prop node. Now, it's not, the node itself is not new. What is new is that you can now bring in different types of props, and then you can use them as ragdolls inside the state. So because we've added a bunch of options to that node, So for example, one thing you can do is bring in animated geometry like this RBD sim, and then boom, you can move pieces around. So if you're not happy with the way like your destruction went, you can always tweak that directly inside the state. And because we've added so many options to how this node actually works, there's a example on the content library. There's a file with the many types of props you can create, like a collection of props, animated props, deforming props. Everything is on the content library. At the end of this talk, I'll just put up a slide with a bunch of links so you don't have to remember this. And then boom, now you're ready to go. You can finally have some fun inside the state. So once you enter the ragdoll state, like we saw earlier with Otto, you'll be greeted with these parameters once you hit G on your keyboard. And you can see we have stiffness, damping, which are relatively, like they mean something, but like what does match local transforms and match local world, transforms actually mean? Well, here's a little contour sheet. So you can see in the top left corner, I have Otto, he's just moving his arm around. And then if I set those joints to active, you can see that's in the top right corner. His arm just flops around because it's fully being simulated. But if I set my match world to 1 and then up the stiffness, I can get a movement. Basically, what the solver will then try to do is like keep up with that animation. So depending on how fast your character is moving, you might have to up the stiffness. And then you can see that those shapes will be colored this like dark gray to show that it's using match world. And the shapes that are completely black are like not active, which means they're not being simulated whatsoever, but they will still collide with, like if you have two characters interacting, like the other character will still collide with those black shapes. What we'd added in 21 is because it's not always easy to figure out if you set match world transforms, it's not easy to figure out where your shape is being pulled to. Basically, now I've set the heads to match world transforms, so you can see that it's this darker gray. And this line basically is saying like, oh, this head is trying to get back to that position. So you can kind of see where your character is being pulled. Local stiffness basically is a way to match local transform, sorry, is a way to keep the character oriented the same way you would have him at the start of your animation. So if you had, for example, if I were to sit him on top of a car, like driving, and I was driving the car around, I would want his chest to stay fairly upright and not completely flop like in the top left corner there. So as I increase my stiffness, I can get back to the original pose that he had and then tweak the legs or the arms if I want his arm to flop around a bit more. So we already saw them earlier with the box example, dragging Otto. So basically tethers, if you're familiar with bullets, those are just soft constraints. We couldn't call them constraints because that's already taken. So we've named them tethers, but the principle is fairly similar. You can see here that I've constrained my box to the teapot, and so the box doesn't move anymore. At the start of this GIF, they were not, so the box was falling around. Let's look at some of the parameters that you can set on your tether to have something that's a bit nicer than just a box that's just standing there. So I've animated my teapot now, and I've tethered my box to the cube. And you can see that I'm changing the stiffness here. With a relatively low stiffness of 0.4, you can see that the cube's kind of like jiggling around and it's kind of lagging behind. And as soon as I increase the stiffness, it's basically staying perfectly still. And what the lock parameter does is that it basically makes it infinitely stiff. And essentially what happens under the hood, if you're familiar with that, is that it creates a glue constraint instead of soft constraint, so it will not move. It will just now budge, and you can see that it's absolutely staying still. Another thing you can tweak is the rest length. So we compute the rest length when you actually tether the two objects together. But then what we give you control over is a multiplier on the rest length. So if I set it to 0.1 here, you can see that the box is getting dragged towards the teapot. And if I set it to 2, then it's kind of pushing away from the teapot. And obviously you can animate that parameter so you can have it like kind of yo-yo around and have the box being dragged by the teapot and then like going the other way. I think all these examples have one object that's actually inactive, so it's not moving whatsoever. But if the two objects were active, like because it's trying to keep the distance between them, they're kind of influencing each other, and that's something that's different from like constraints in the anime state, like your animation constraints. These are kind of mutual, where like both objects will try and like fight each other to keep that rest length the same distance. What happens if you change your pose on the teapot, for example, here, you will see that now when I play my animation, I'm being slow to do it for some reason, you will see that the box is kind of snapping because, as I said earlier, we compute the rest length when you first create the tether. So what happens is that if you change the pose of one object, that rest length is no longer valid and you will get this snap. So I made this graphic that hopefully shows you what's happening. So in the first, on the left there, you've got the teapot. I've created my tether with the cube being the pink square there. And then if I move the teapot, then it will still try and keep that rest length of 4 units there. So you can see that the box is being yanked up towards the thing. But if I click that button that I clicked in the GIF, recompute initial conditions, it'll be like, oh, the teapot is now 8 units away. So you won't get that snap anymore, and it will preserve that new rest length that you've set. This also recomputes the orientation. So if you orient an object differently, that will also need to be recomputed. And new in 21 that we've added is that you can use the locators that you can create in the animate state and use them as tether anchors. So here I just have a locator that's animated from left to right. As you can tell, I'm a great animator. And then it's just dragging Otto around because I created a tether between the locator and his head. So you can see here, like I can hit C in the viewport and then go to the locator tool. And then I just hit H, creates the locator. And then if I go and hit select both, hit H, they will create the tether, and now they're tethered. nothing's happening because the locator is not moving whatsoever. So I can now animate my locator and move it like a bunch of units to the right on the x-axis, set some keys, and then I can go back to Ragdoll, set my locator to be inactive, so it just follows the animation and it's not being simulated. And you can see that now my locator is basically dragging my box around. And if I turn off these options to hide controls when scrubbing, you can see the tether and everything working together nicely. Here is an example of how you can put all of that together. So you can see Harry is doing his best Spider-Man impression. You can see he's like basically being tethered to a bunch of falling buildings, if you can believe those are buildings. And then at the end there, you can see that he's tethering to some point in space, which is just a locator. I guess I should have framed that better so it doesn't look stupid. And then I really love this animation that Sasha made. He was nice enough to let me use it. So you can see one guy riding, I guess, Flippy's cousin, which is a mechanical bull. And he's like flopping around, like doing his best yeehaw. A little bit about what's happening behind the scenes, although that's scary, so it's just going to be the one slide. Yes, all of this runs on Apex. And essentially, this is what happens when you enter the Ragdoll state. We have a bunch of inputs that run through this black node that was the Ragdoll solver. The blue nodes usually don't exist. They only get created when you actually add a tether, which is how it works. Basically, when you add a tether, it creates a bunch of nodes in this graph, and the graph reruns. So pretty nice and procedural. If you have more questions, feel free to talk to me about it. But I'm going to switch to the next slide because this is scary. Here are all the links for the stuff that I mentioned earlier. So the content library examples, the great masterclass by Mihner, and then also the little bot content library example. With the environment, everything is in there. And then just want to say that I'm presenting this, but all of this is made possible by everyone at Side Effects, who's doing a great job. So thank you for everyone for making this possible. And thank you to all of you for attending and just being active members of the community. This is really cool. And none of this matters if you don't exist. So thank you. And then if you might have seen this before, please don't use curvy wires. They look horrible. Use straight wires. Thank you. That's it.
Time for questions.
Yeah, I get to go home early. What? Yeah.
What's up, Tom?
What's up?
Nice work.
That's not a question.
So, deep down, is the curvy wires the issue because it hurts you with your organization, or is it just like a personal preference?
My main gripe with them is that if you have a bunch of them plugging into a merge, for example, they'll start merging into one wire, and then you don't know where that wire is coming from. And that's super annoying because you'll like click and be like, what's going on? And everyone's just like, oh, they look bad, but I don't care. I just want it to work, you know?
So from an efficiency standpoint.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom. Thank you. Question for the scene animate state. It makes me wonder, obviously we're just running Apex under the hood. Have you explored, or can you see use cases to move other Houdini workflows, subspace workflows, converted into Apex graphs that are not rigging or animation related? Think something simple like an Apex-based poly extrude that you could run directly.
Oh my God, I have great news for you. Earlier this year, I did a talk at FMX, like basically and it's all about that kind of stuff. And I built that polyextrude thing you mentioned. I don't know if you're like egging me on or something, but like
I'm not.
yeah.
That is really cool.
So yeah, like that talk is available. It has a stupid name. It's called "This is what the edge of your seat was made for." It's not, but yeah, it's on the Houdini YouTube channel. You can check it out. You can always ask me questions online. I'm terminally online, so you should find me there.
Lovely. Answered my question before I asked. Good.
This light is bright.
Do we have any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.